Art is a universal medium of expression. As artists, we are not confined by the existing language barriers that continue to define our society as we know it. We are free to express our thoughts, ideas, and emotions through the single stroke of a paintbrush. While difficult to put into words, art is defined as, and I quote, "the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination." End quote. But what makes this definition so powerful is the word human. Not American, not European, not black, not white, but human. A common thread through the entire human race. But one thing that cannot be condensed into one single definition is the impact of art. Socially and politically, artists of this time period and ones long ago have used their artistic abilities to make drastic statements. Take Frida Kahlo, for example. Her artwork set new precedents across the world, making social impacts that could never have been imagined. Even though her subject matter was mostly portraiture, she included details and artistic aspects that made enormous social impacts. For example, her paintings redefined the relationship between traditional marriage and motherhood, claiming that motherhood was not a necessary facet of traditional marriage. She also advocated for world peace and other similar movements, tending to have a left-wing political view. But because art is so individual and unique to every human being, it is the effect on oneself that is most important. While the effect on the artist, rather than those around him, may not be the first thing that comes to mind, it has just as great, if not greater, an impact on the person creating the art. This idea generated the thought that, if the creative expression itself had such a great impact on the artist, then art could and should be used specifically to help positively affect people who choose to pursue this form of healing. This practice came to be known as art therapy. The American Art Therapy Association defines art therapy as the therapeutic use of art making within a professional relationship by people who experience illness, trauma, or challenges in living, and by people who seek personal development. Through this exploration of art therapy, one may be able to answer the essential question, how is the use of artistic expression as therapy an effective mode of relief, rehabilitation, and recovery? People may wonder how art therapy is any more or less helpful than your average spoken therapy session. To answer this, it is necessary to dive into the psychoanalytical relationship of trauma and artistic expression. When a person experiences trauma, they create a mental representation of that incident. However, this is not an actual reciprocation of what happened, but rather a slightly askew representation, warped by feelings, memories, and cognitive states. By creating a tangible representation of the patient's thought rather than just a vocalization, the art therapist is provided with the proper tools to analyze the work and make accurate conclusions as to what the patient's visions indicate. Also, the creation of the art forces patients to spend time thinking and focusing on how to artistically portray such abstract thoughts, ideas, and emotions. This focus helps to decrease the drive of cognitive impulse, in that the patient is less likely to act impulsively, but rather take the time to focus and think about their work. Next, we're going to meet a practicing art therapist, Miss Gretchen Kircher. Miss Kircher works at the Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C., under a grant from Tracy's Kids, a nonprofit organization that provides art therapists and supplies to hematology and oncology pediatric hospitals in the D.C. area. In this interview, she speaks about the wide use of art therapy. So, focusing on the art as therapy, what is it about artistic expression that's so therapeutic, do you think?
Well, there's a few reasons. One, I'm kind of going off subject a little bit, but in terms of using art therapeutically, when you talk with someone, when you're in a counseling session, and they ask you a question, and you're kind of like, you don't want to talk about it. It's something very personal, very deep, very hurtful. Maybe you have a lot of boundaries you have to get through, consciously and unconsciously. And some of those are the tone of your voice, obviously redirecting the conversation, and there's all these boundaries that you just go through in order to kind of steer the conversation the way you want it to go so that it's not as painful for you. Art cuts through those. You don't deal with any boundaries when you do art. And so a lot of times you'll be focusing on just the process of making the art, which is also very therapeutic, and that's what lowers any of your inhibitions and lowers those boundaries. And then the content is more what you will then talk about, like, why did you draw that a certain way? And that will kind of get rid of hours of published time, so to speak. But just the process of it, because you get lost in the tactile sensation of it. So your mind can be going off somewhere and you won't even realize what you're actually drawing. But it's very just relaxing in general. And the tactile part of it is, just a sensory thing. Everything comes with a touch, a smell, visually. And that is also something that art therapists learn as to how to read what the client is relaxing to or, getting stressed over. So certain colors may be relaxing to one person and not to another. And so you just gently and quietly switch when you see that someone is building back their resistance. Then you move to something that may be a lot calmer for them.
But to fully know and appreciate the enormous impact of artistic expression on the patient, one must understand the healing process itself. There are 3 main stages of the healing process that a person must experience when working to overcome a problem. These are relief, rehabilitation, and recovery. While different in their nature, these 3 phases outline the progress in which a person goes through during the healing process. The practice of art therapy is meant to facilitate the progression of these phases in order to help the person overcome their problem healthily and smoothly. Relief is the immediate sense of liberation from the emotions that accompany trauma. Whether it's sadness, anger, or guilt, these emotions can plague our well-being and affect our everyday lives, even without us knowing it. We may get up an hour later because we just don't have the strength to get up on time, or we may act sharp and uncooperative when trying to get along with our fellow students or coworkers. Whatever the case may be, the first part of the psychological healing process is finding relief from these emotions. This is where art therapy is particularly effective. By simply throwing paint onto a canvas or feeling the clay between your fingers, you can simply forget about the problems that may be plaguing your thoughts and actions. The practice of art engages almost all of your senses and allows you to fully immerse yourself in the activity. By focusing on the immediate activity at hand, the new feelings of enjoyment and freedom begin to degrade the darker emotions, helping to begin the healing process. Rehabilitation refers to the stage that not only tries to relieve the patient of their stress, but is working to overcome these emotions in a long-term setting. While it is one thing to forget about the problem, it is a whole new milestone to start to work past this trauma emotionally and psychologically. By this, it means confronting these specific deep emotions and working to release them, and realizing the negative effects of keeping them inside rather than expressing them. Considering the circumstances, this step can be somewhat smooth or particularly difficult. If a person is facing an ongoing illness, they may be faced with the constant reminder of their ailment, stunting their ability to overcome the emotional trauma. However, it is essential that they start to overcome the psychological anxiety that accompanies trauma in order to assure that these emotions will not resurface later. Finally, recovery is referring to the long-term, indefinite amount of time after the patient has stopped participating in art therapy in a professional setting. While this may mean that they are not regularly doing art, they still do need to practice the tools and techniques that they gain through art therapy in order to stay emotionally stable and healthy for the time being. Art therapy provides the patient with actions to take in order to keep the dark emotions from taking over. For example, if a person feels an anxiety attack coming on, they may want to try to just grab a marker or a paintbrush and make some meaningless strokes on a piece of paper as a means of expressing their anxiety. With steady, slow breathing and complete concentration on the stroke making, the person can avoid experiencing an attack or any other form of dark emotion by applying the proper techniques gained through their time spent doing art. In order to allow for a healthy progression through the healing process, it is imperative that the proper actions be taken in order to make the patient feel comfortable and free to express their innermost thoughts and feelings. To begin the patient's healing process, one must understand how to properly facilitate a successful art therapy session. One of the main reasons why art therapy is so effective is because the people participating are free to make whatever they choose, creating an open, comfortable environment. In Frederick B. Tate's Art Therapy, Enhancing Psychosocial Nursing, he brings to light the importance of giving the patients the freedom to draw without feeling threatened. He states, "Most clients find it less threatening to draw a picture of a house, person, or tree than to disclose private information about their feelings and pasts. Drawing is less likely to invite intellectualization than talking. Some clients tend to project deeply blocked and denied emotions and experiences more openly via art than by conventional linguistic forms." End quote. Not only does he address the importance of the patient's freedom of expression, but he even highlights art therapy's importance through a comparison with linguistic expression. It is generally easier to reveal something if communicated through a physical form rather than a vocalization. By creating this comfortable environment, the patients are more likely to express the thoughts that they have since suppressed. It is also important that each therapy session be tailored to those who are participating. Given the severity of the issue, a certain amount of time sitting down and drawing can be a considerable achievement. These sessions need to be, quote, simple and realistic, helping to minimize any sense of pressure or anxiety in the patients. This is also referred to in Lorraine Clark's Art Therapy, A Learning Experience for Students in Nursing, when she talks about the job of the therapist in creating this open environment, stating, "The art therapist monitors the anxiety level of the group and shifts focus if it appears that a topic is too threatening or likely to reveal more than a student might be comfortable with after the session." End quote. This highlights the job of the art therapist in that it is necessary to be fully engaged at all times and tailor the session to the emotions of the group. These art therapy sessions are meant to give the patients a sense of control. A common thread between the trauma that people experience is that they ultimately end up feeling powerless. This inability to express their ideas creates an unstable lifestyle in which the patient no longer feels as if he or she has control over anything. To counter this feeling, the physical nature of art therapy gives back this sense of control to the patients. In Angelique Stevenson Taylor's article, Exploring the Role of Art Making in Recovery, Change, and Self-Understanding, an interpretive phenomenological analysis of interviews with everyday creative people, she addresses this specific facet of art therapy and art in general. She claims that artists are seen as, quote, agents of control, who are, quote, capable of overcoming and controlling psychological distress. Allowing these people to have complete control over their artwork revitalizes their sense of strength and self-worth, attributes necessary to start the healing process. Let's take a look at a sample piece of art and go through what a proper analysis would be like. To give you some context on this piece of art, let's say this was created by a young boy, maybe the age of 7 or 8. He has a mother, a father, and a sister, but his mother and father are separated. Throughout the past few years, he has been exhibiting some behavioral problems, especially when getting along with his classmates or teachers. and this art may be able to clue us in on why this is. First, let's take a look at the dark clouds at the top of the picture. These may indicate a feeling of trapped, or darkness, or overwhelming gloom. That may indicate a sort of fear or anxiety that he feels in his home life. Next, let's take a look at the houses and what they depict. One is drawn with some bright colors that may suggest a sort of happiness and a feeling of welcome, while the other is drawn with a more darker palette of colors, which may suggest a feeling of anxiety or unknown or fear. This would correlate to the next indicator, the darkness of the father's eyes. These dark eye sockets may suggest a lack of connection between the artist and the father. He may feel that the father is too authoritative and he needs his approval for anything that he does. Also, the mother and the daughter are holding hands. This may indicate that the artist may be harnessing some jealousy towards the mother's relationship with the daughter, and because he does not have a strong relationship with his father, he may feel alone and inferior. When circling himself to indicate where he is in the picture, he made a very defined end to the circle at the very top. This specific need for connection and unity, even though it's within the circle that surrounds him, may correspond to the lack of connection in the family itself. Finally, when looking at the colors of the picture, you can notice that the mother's hair is colored in, while the father is gone without hair. This may indicate that he feels more comfortable when talking to the mother and more of a connection, and that she is more approachable than the father. All of these indicators are very healthy signs of expression, and allow the art therapist to make a quicker diagnosis on what the patient is feeling and how to help them. The results of the art therapy session are essential when dealing with the well-being of the patient. It is necessary that the therapist exert the maximum amount of effort into analyzing the artwork and the session itself in order to reach the most accurate conclusions about the problem as well as prescribe the proper treatment. First, therapists have found that an immediate follow-up on the session helps to prolong its success. While artistic expression can be therapeutic for a finite amount of time, the person can easily continue suppressing their thoughts if they are not continually engaged by an external force. Art therapists claim that this follow-up is a chance for the therapist to capitalize on the new and possibly fleeting sense of openness felt by the patient. Through immediate engagement, these people are able to avoid their desire to continue suppressing the issues that were once expressed through their artwork. Second, by analyzing the student's work, conclusions can be drawn which allow for a quicker diagnosis. While these conclusions range based on the specific trauma experienced by the patient, they give the therapist a baseline understanding of what the person is trying to communicate. For example, in Susan Kelly's The Use of Art Therapy with Sexually Abused Children, Kelly explores the idea of, quote, emotional indicators. These are specific aspects of a person's drawing which, quote, reflect the child's anxieties, concerns, and attitudes. These indicators are used to reveal to the therapist how the person visualizes his or her trauma. Each individual mark can correspond with a specific feeling or emotion. For example, the defined enclosing of a circle can indicate the need for completion and unity, or dark eyes can indicate a lack of connection between the patient and the subject of the art. Finally, because the effectiveness of art therapy is so subjective, it is important that the therapist finds an affirmation of its success in each patient. It is important to realize that art therapy lacks statistics to prove its effectiveness. While it may be practiced by people across the country, it is difficult to measure its success when the results are so personal. Thus, personal achievements that have been met through art therapy can be seen as these affirmations of its success. Frederick B. Tate addresses this thought in his article, Art Therapy, Enhancing Psychosocial Nursing, stating, quote, evaluation does not need to be complex or incorporate advanced statistics to demonstrate the relative effectiveness of therapy. observation of measurable behavior and self-ratings by clients related to the extent to which a goal was achieved may be all that is needed. Because art is so subjective, it is nearly impossible to analytically measure its effectiveness. However, this subjective nature of art therapy is what defines its success in that each patient is able to set personal goals, giving them motivation to continue their recovery and find success in their achievements. Art therapy is a relatively new practice. It has only been within the last 50 years or so that artistic expression has become a viable source of therapy. Because the majority of therapy is vocal, people are unaware of how helpful art therapy can be. But that is not to say that art therapy is slowly picking up steam. Today, art therapy is being utilized in hospitals, nursing homes, daycares, and other facilities across the country. It is practiced with children of all ages, returning war veterans, natural disaster survivors, cancer patients, and just about anyone who is facing some sort of personal issue. Motion is even being made in the government to recognize the practice of art therapy. Here is Miss Gretchen Kircher about the use of art therapy in today's society.
Yeah. The profession of art therapy is actually growing. Recently, Maryland just passed a law that it now licenses art therapists, which means that they have to follow the same guidelines, but eventually, hopefully, insurance will then accept art therapists as a viable form of mental health counseling. And with the growing awareness of mental health, I think there will be more art therapy jobs and, a greater presence of the profession in the future. So that is something that's very, a good thing that's happening, since our profession is, in the United States, is about 30 years old.
Yeah.
Now. So it's been around for a little while, but it's been a long struggle.
It's now picking up steam.
Yes,
a little bit. It's
awesome.
Going back to the essential question on whether or not art therapy is an effective mode of relief, rehabilitation, and recovery, we can conclude with this thesis statement. Through an analysis of its psychotherapeutic effects on different patients, art therapy can be viewed as an effective therapeutic practice. If people begin to understand the effectiveness of art therapy, then maybe, just maybe, we as humans can make an even bigger impact on the lives of people across the world who have no artistic means of expression. Take it from Miss Julia Deitch. This extraordinary woman experienced an indescribable loss when her brother lost his life during the Pentagon crash on September 11, 2001. She is a perfect example of how art therapy can provide you with an outlet for expression and save you from a place that seems impossible to escape.
So I'm sure this is kind of difficult, but if you had to pinpoint something about artistic expression that you find so therapeutic, what would you think that would be? I'm sure there's so many things.
Yeah, I guess I think it expresses your innermost soul. Mm-hmm. It's the soul that you had when you were 5. That's still precious and innocent and beautiful. Mm-hmm. And the world sort of piles on stuff, and trying to get that piece of your essential self is really important, and you can do that through art really well because it's immediate. Mm-hmm. When I first started painting, I painted very quickly because I didn't want to. I had to paint with acrylics mm-hmm. and airbrush mm-hmm. because I didn't want to take time to stop for it to dry. I needed it to be fast, and then with this kind of thing, you slow way down, mm-hmm. and it takes much, much longer. But early on, I think I needed that, 5-year-old. Yeah. This is my attention span. So I think that is a really nice way of expressing that essential self.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's neat the way it's like your participation in art has kind of evolved from like the painting into the copper work. It's really interesting. Would you like recommend art therapy for somebody going through a similar situation?
Oh, yes. I mean, I actually think that everyone should see an art therapist.
Yeah.
I think it really is an amazingly powerful way of finding out who you are. And I think everyone needs to find out who they are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's extremely essential in a crisis situation. But I think it's really good for everybody.